Hi, and welcome to this AI and C# video on the Microsoft Agent Framework. Today we're going to look into something called AGUI, which is the acronym for Agent User Interaction Protocol. When I first saw this name, I actually thought it was something to do with AutoGen and their drag and drop features that have been there for a long time. But it's actually a new protocol that is very, very new. Came back in May, I think. Of 2025, so it's less than 6 months old. So when I saw that and found out it's a protocol, I said, oh, not another protocol. We have MCP, we have A2A, we have all these different things. But the more I looked into it, it really solves an actual problem in terms of the UI part of AI. And it does it in quite an elegant way. And a standard way that I really hope this protocol will kick on. Microsoft is embracing it, so that's a really good sign. But what is it? So when we built our small console apps here in this series, we don't have a problem. We just have some consoles, and we can do normal calls, we can do streaming, we can do tools, and so on. But everything happens in one process. In real life, that's not often the case. Of course, it can still be done, but often we have a front end and we have a back end. And the front end would be the chatbot or whatever we do, and the server have the back end agent. Of course, there's also back end systems and automated behind the scenes things without front ends. And this protocol is not for that. But if you have this front end back end system, and you've tried it in real life, you know that it's quite simple, of course, to have a back end and you do a request response in order to get some information. So you could have the user as a question and get a response back. No big deal. It's also easy just to couple a bunch of MCP servers, own tools and such onto the backend server and have them be able to be called, so the user can just ask and the server can use its own server tools. But where it becomes tricky is when we need to be like ChatGPT and do a stream request and get a streaming response. Because how do you do that? It is possible. I have actually done it in a sample application and also in a real application. But if you sit with some React front end and a C# back end, how do you begin to send server-side events, which it is? And how do you make it scalable? How do you make it easy to work with? So it can be done, but it's a pain. Another thing is, which I have actually never thought about, what if the front end actually have some capabilities that you want to expose as tools to the backend? So just like we have server tools, what if the front end could be changed, the color of something or how something looks, and we wanted the AI to do that? I actually have really no idea without this protocol how you could do that. But that is what we can do in a very, very elegant way. And let's go in and see some code, because there's actually not too much to it. So here we are in the system, and we are working with this agent user interaction, and we have a client and a server. So for that reason, I have gone up and used the multiple startup projects. So I run both the server and the client. And I will go to the server, but I will just start the code and set a breakpoint on the client here. So let me run it, and then we go quickly to the server and see what that's about. And here we have the client UI. Of course, I'm still using consoles, but this could just have easily been a Blazor app that would have this problem of talking with a backend server. So what happens is we start with the normal business as usual. We just make a client and we make an agent. And in this case, I make an agent with one tool call that is called getWeather. And then we make a normal web application. So had this been a standard ASP.NET Core web UI, we have had this out of the box. And the only thing we need to really do is we need to say we need to add a ADUI as a service, and we need to map it to an endpoint, in our case, just the root of this. And then we run the system. And if we do that, we will see that we are just running as something here, and we have a local host here. In real life, it will of course be HTTPS and over the internet instead of just a local host here. So you can see the server is nothing other than instantiating an agent and exposing it. The client is also fairly simple in that we just make an HTTP client because we need to talk with the server, and we do that over the URL we have chosen. Then I make something with the color of the text here. Right now you can see it's white. And then I make a ADUI chat client. So instead of a normal chat client, I make an ADUI client. And all it needs is an HTTP client and the server URL. And once I have such a client, I can do sort of the same as I normally do using the agent part, create AI agents. And here I can give it tools, which will be the local tools. We also gave tools over here, but suddenly we can give this proxy of an agent tools that will be handed on to the server, which is quite a cool concept. This agent, however, is not a fully blown agent. For example, if we give it instructions, it will not follow those instructions. And that's because it's just a proxy. We can give it tools, but the rest we cannot really give because it won't follow that along. So it's a kind of a shell of an agent. And for that reason, for example, if we want to make an instruction, we need to give it ourselves here. And in the same manner, it cannot work with the threads. So we also need to give that on our own. This might be because it's so new a protocol, and we might at some point be able to give the instructions and the threads like normal, and behind the scenes everything would work. But for now, we need to do a little extra here. But trust me, it's worth doing compared to what we get. Because what we get, and it can be perhaps a little difficult to understand if you haven't had this pain of how in the world do I get a client to talk to a server and stream the data back. Again, can be done, but trust me, it's damn annoying. But in this case, we're just going in and making an agent. So if I say hi, it can come back. And if we notice there is no API keys or endpoints or anything here, there's just the URL. And the URL can probably also be protected by normal HTTP, but in our case, we don't need it. It's just an endpoint for our client to work with. So what we do is a little like we normally do. The only thing is we keep track of all the messages instead of in a thread. We just keep them. But then we can suddenly use streaming here. And streaming, yes, in a one process is easy, just back to console. But here it's actually going over HTTP and sending the server events back. So if we look behind the scenes, we can actually see that there is some text event streams going on back and forward when I wrote hello. So, okay, we can say then, is that only the only thing? No, it's also able to expose the different things that happens on the server. And it does that using the different content back from the updates here. So it can give us back the text, that's what we're seeing here. It can give us back any function call, which we haven't made yet, any results of those function calls, and any errors that might be. And again, we are able to give a local tool, again, something I would never have thought about how to do in real life, because I would just have said that's impossible. But we can actually give this tool, and on the fly, when we call here, that tool is being passed onto the server, given as if it was something that could happen on the server. When the AI wants to call it, it communicates back to the client, executes the thing, which is in our case just change the color, and go on its merry way to work. So let's see some of this in some code here. So I could, for example, go in and say, what is the weather like in Paris? And if I do that, it should say like, not link, sorry. And now it knows it's just a tool call and not try to find a link to the weather in Paris. So what it did, it made a tool call on the server, got the response back, and we could see on the client, it actually gave information on what it was doing. So we can make a GUI that indicates, hey, we are calling this tool with this information. Again, something that was very, very difficult to send using these streaming events. But this is packed in, so we can do it very, very simple. And we get the result back. And of course, that result from the tool can be used. So we wouldn't need to write this out, but if we want to make a GUI that is very interactive and telling exactly what's going on, we can do it, compared to in the past where this was really a pain. In the same manner, we can go in and then call a local tool and pass it on to the server. So we could, for example, say change the color to green. And now it did a tool, it passed the text onto the server. The server found out it got that extra tool. It passed that request back to the client, where it ran this piece of code down here. We can set a breakpoint and say change this color to yellow. So this is happening over streaming on the fly from a server. Again, I would have no clue how to make this with the normal HTTP. But it works. We can suddenly give client-side tools. I could see desktop apps doing something directly in a system while the AI is local, is remote. It is kind of incredible in my mind what this can do. And the only thing that are the drawback is we need to keep track of the entire conversation, and we need to make the system call upfront ourselves. The rest happens quite automatically. And again, we just get these events back, so we on the fly can update a GUI telling how it's going. So much pain and things I have thought about needing to do and not done because it was hard can suddenly be expressed in a very, very simple way. And again, we don't have any credentials here, which is also incredible. So as you can hear, I'm really a fan of this protocol, and I really hope it gains traction, because this will make the life of us who also needs to build a GUI on top of an AI much simpler. So with that, thank you for attending this one, and see you in the next one.